Matt is a senior program manager in Microsoft Azure, working with Logic Apps Management, and he worked for Microsoft for 12 years. Prior to joining the product team in 2016, he was a solution architect in UK, working with customers on Azure app development and data insights. He'll be talking about making Azure Integration Services real. Over to Mike.
Thank you. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? Good, thank you. Bit of energy's fine. You haven't all fallen asleep. Before I start this afternoon, I've got a little question for you because this is my third Integrate Now, and somebody who's been here several times grabbed me yesterday and came up and really asked me about my picture. And so I really wanted to gather your opinion here because, I kind of like this picture. A, because people keep asking me questions about it. And secondly, because I think this presents, a confident, suave British gentleman. But apparently, it's really scary. And, I was a little upset by this. And so I did some comparison and had a look at some of our other speakers. And all I could see is, so you think this is scarier than perhaps something like, I don't know, this? Which, if I had to caption, would be something like, you spilled my pint. Is Dan here? Right, let's keep this a secret. We won't tell him about this, all right? Nobody mention it. It's our secret. Okay. So, this session today, you'll be glad to hear after lunch, is a session that includes absolutely zero new product announcements. Oh, good. Oh, well, I'm glad you're excited about that. Excellent. So within the integration team, and I'm part of the Logic Apps team, we all talk to customers all the time, right? That's a huge part of the job. But I suppose it tends to be something that I get involved with more often than not, where we talk to big enterprise customers who are embarking on a journey in the cloud and are looking to how Azure integration can help them be successful. And so this session is really, because we've kind of covered lots of in-depth technology, is really actually lifting out a bit and thinking, well, what are we really trying to do here? And what are some of the pitfalls that I see customers coming across when they're doing things like this? Okay. So, anybody who's been to a Microsoft conference, other than this one, in the last 2 years may have heard this term once or 100,000 times. But there's real value here. Digital transformation, you've heard it before, but it can be overused, but I think there's a real point here. And I wanted to just point out before I start what I think digital transformation is and why it relates to the stuff you've been hearing about over the last day and a half. If I think about digital transformation, what I see it as is I see customers creating data. They create data from sources they've never thought of before, and they create lots and lots and lots of it. And at the same time, the ability to create interfaces or endpoints or applications, whatever you want to call them, is becoming greater and greater as well. What I see digital transformation really being for a lot of customers is finding the right data and the right endpoint, and connecting those two things together, and creating new customer experiences, new journeys, differentiating themselves from their competitors. That's digital transformation. And when you're connecting interfaces and data, it sounds a little bit like integration, right? So businesses depend on all kinds of applications. Many of them are mission critical, and I imagine a lot of you either work with customers or work at customers of ours working on this kind of information. But if you can't connect these applications together, if you can't connect an endpoint to another endpoint, then you're losing value. And more importantly, is something your competitors are probably working out how to do whilst you're not doing it. So, you can take Matt's word for it all you want, but this is a quote from Gartner here about application integration really being the backbone of this digital transformation journey. So the stuff you've been hearing about over the last day and a half is absolutely at the center of this trend. If you want to make those connections between data and applications, integration is key to it. And that's why the stuff you've been hearing about is so important. Gartner has actually come up with a term for this kind of market, and they called it an iPaaS or an e-iPaaS, an integration platform as a service. And they reckon in the next few years, most big organizations, like 2/3, will have implemented one of these because they see the same trend. They see that this technology is at the heart of making this differentiation in the market. And there's a lot more scenarios that we cover now. Things are changing because of other new technology. So, you know, if we think about the integration market maybe 15 years, most of it was about application to application inside an organization. Some of it was business to business, and that's where things like EDI got started. But now, SaaS is an enormous component of this, right? Most of you if you're working in your own organization on integration, are integrating software as a service and COTS products into your estate. And if you can't connect, I mean, there's no point implementing an online service unless you can connect it to everything else. Where's the value? That's integration. And then IoT, the one we always forget about IoT, it's all the cool stuff about, look, my device does this and I get the data. Well, what happens once you've got the data? It's of no value unless you then integrate it into everything else. So the more these new technology changes are creating more and more integration, and if you want to innovate on that data and make real value in your market and differentiate yourself, you have to connect it together. I think John said in his slide yesterday, the more you innovate, the more you integrate, and this is absolutely part of that. There's a bunch of challenges with this, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. Interfaces and APIs. How do you connect these things together? But I tell you what, there's emerging standards there. And we'll go into that in a bit, but HTTP-based APIs are making this easier and easier to do. What data and sources, how are you storing it? What approach do you use to architect this? And then crossing on-premises, cloud, and SaaS are all very important. And this is where this iPaaS concept comes in. So an integration platform as a service allows you to embrace the API economy. You've seen the API management sessions over the last couple of days. So hopefully you understand that term about using APIs as a way to abstract your technology. Giving you a flexible platform, so then if you can orchestrate calls between these APIs, you can quickly create scenarios, create logic. You need to connect that across SaaS, on-prem, and cloud. And then by doing that, you get this digital transformation. You enable that story. So when we talked last year, in the same session we had last year, we talked about 4 concepts: APIs, workflows, messaging, and events. And the 4 products that we have within Azure that represent those buckets. And we talked about Azure Integration Services as our iPaaS, our way of expressing that concept of building an integration platform as a service. And this session is really now about how people have got on with that, what things have happened as people have tried to take this approach and go to the cloud. And as you've seen, many of them have been really, really successful doing it. But there's some lessons in there. So the first one, and this kind of echoes what I've just said, understand the principles, because they're really important. If you understand the principles, then you can then build technology based upon these components. So what I'm going to do first, and if you're a super expert in this area, this is probably not going to be the most interesting demo in the world, because what I've tried to do is be as simple as possible in connecting these pieces. Because if you understand the simplest demo and you understand how these pieces connect together, you can then build far more complicated ones on top based on those principles. So we're going to look at a demo very quickly that is based upon a simple ordering scenario. So if we wanted, if we imagine we're a big organization and we process widgets, there's a few things that need to happen to be able to fulfill that widget order. So the first thing we need to do, if you imagine it in reverse order, is actually process the widget order. So we need to be able to take in the widget order, and then send orders for widgets to a bunch of different systems. So we've probably got ERP systems that are doing logistics. We've got CRM systems that are tracking information about the customer. We've probably got some other system that we've built in-house, email, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all the things that need to happen when we actually complete that widget order. How do we know we've got a widget order? Well, Event Grid is telling us. Event Grid tells us when there are orders to process, and that's the most efficient way to do it. Event Grid won't tell us there's orders that are there. We don't need to check in the middle of the night if we don't get orders. If we tend to get orders on a 9 to 5 pattern, it tells us there are orders there when there are orders. We know they're there because we're using Service Bus. So Service Bus is our transitory store of orders as they come in. And as we create orders, they're put on Service Bus, and Service Bus can apply features like duplicate detection to those orders as they come in. And then we're using a second logic app. We're using a second logic app, and this is really part of that microservices way of componentizing the work we're creating. And the second logic app is doing the simplest thing it can when somebody sends an order in. So I send an order in. I, as a customer, all I care about is that you've got my order and you've given me a tracking number that I can respond to. So this is what that first logic app does, or second, depending on the order. And then finally, we're exposing that through API management. Why are we doing that? Because we want to provide a consistent interface that the applications, whether they be a mobile application, whether they be the website, whether they be another system, can talk to. And if we decide we want to get rid of everything behind the API management interface and swap it out for something else, we more than happily do that without changing the application interface that we've had. So let's quickly look through that demo. Okay, let's look at, I'm trying to remember which logic app is which. So let's look at that, the logic app on the right-hand side. I think this is the right one. I've named them really stupidly. No, I've clicked on the wrong place. Come on, Azure. No, wrong one. You didn't see this. Wipe your memories for a second. So here's that logic app on the right-hand side. So this one is the one that's triggered by Event Grid. So Event Grid is going to tell us when messages turn up, and then we have to process them. So we're triggered here by Event Grid. Now this is all pre-configured. I'll show you how you do it in Service Bus in a second. We then get messages from a Service Bus. It's a topic in this case. Queue would work in the same way. So we are pulling messages from the Service Bus topic. We're doing it in a group of 20. And then we're going to loop through them in a for each loop. Now, again, I use SAP and an ERP system and stuff like that. When I demo this, I use Teams and email. All right? Just suspend your disbelief that these are ERP systems, but it's a lot easier to demo. And again, isn't the point here. A connector would appear for your custom ERP system in exactly the same way as the connector does for Teams. So I loop through all the messages and process them, and I'm using the peak lock pattern. Dan or Ashish talked about this yesterday, to be able to make sure that if there's any failures, I move the messages back onto the Service Bus topic. I only remove them from there when I'm happy that they have been processed successfully. So that's the first logic app. I also have Service Bus configured, and I'll just show you how I set up the Event Grid subscription. Because again, the Event Grid subscription, once it's set up, it's kind of transparent to us, right? It just tells us when stuff happens. So in Events here, I can see that I already have this event subscription set up. That's going to tell me when messages appear on my topic. If you haven't set it up to start with, you can go into this Get Started menu. And then it will take you through the process of either setting up a logic app or any other way in which you want to respond to that event. So this one. Our next logic app is the one that we want to take the order in and return a response as quickly as possible. So this is an HTTP triggered logic app, so it appears as an HTTP API. And we're just doing the steps that let us get the order number and post the message to Service Bus as quickly as possible. So we are doing a, remove the Swagger reference. There we are. We are doing a post to a custom API here, and that's just make it easy for me to get a reference. But this could be an ERP system or CRM or whatever is appropriate. We are doing some JSON composition to set up our message content. We are then posting that message to Service Bus, and we're responding to the customer with their customer ID and responding that way. Okay. And then finally, we're fronting that in API management. So if we go and look here, there we go. So we have this orders API set up here. If you look at the Add API screen, what I did was it went into the Logic App button, and I imported the Logic App from there. Here I can actually see the one I've created that's processing the order. If I select that and move that over there so you can see it. So there we are. So here's the process order Logic App appeared here. You can see the policies that are applied to it. And finally, the response options. If I go into the developer portal and look at the API documentation, I can see the order v1 is now documented. Come on. And we have schema. We have return message information all set up. So the important thing to call out about that demo, and it is a really simple demo, okay? I know that's probably not a real-world production-ready scenario, but it's the bare bones of one. This thing I did without writing a single line of code, okay? Your solutions that you may build may call out to functions, or you may have inline code running in them, and you're going to be doing error handling, and you're going to be doing much more complicated scenarios than I've shown you there. But if you understand the bare bones as I've shown you there, then you can build on them to create these solutions in the iPaaS. So let's go back here. Oh, and of course I'm going to have to click through again to show you what I built. But just to show you again what I built and what you can go and try, you can build all of this with serverless technology and go and try it for no cost, or barely any cost within Azure, and see how these components work together and think about how they apply to the solutions you're going to build. So let's just cover those concepts again, because it's really important to understand these principles, because then you can apply them in a much wider way. And it's a way in which you can also get agreement with your colleagues about how you're going to build these solutions, and I'll come to that in a bit. So APIs, building solutions that are API first. There's a reason API management is so important here, because it allows you to build a consistent interface that your users within your organization can access when they're building applications. It allows you to abstract away systems. You can hide the complexity of things like legacy systems or SaaS systems. So for example, I know certain customers use API management so that they have flexibility in their SaaS provider. If the SaaS provider is providing something that's reasonably commodity to you, then hiding it away allows you to swap in different vendors very easily. So having that consistent layer of APIs that you then manage and orchestrate is really key to this design. Then we get the orchestration. So how you actually connect these systems together, Logic Apps is providing that glue, that application glue that allows you to set up logic and work out how these systems talk to each other and how that interaction is built. Using Service Bus, using that message store as infrastructure within the solution, particularly with cloud-based solutions. Yes, you could write all of this with just a Logic App, but the point is you don't want to, because you want to build a solution with a correct pattern that allows you to scale. And Service Bus here provides reliability and features like duplicate detection that are going to make the solutions you build much more reliable, robust, and scalable. That's why we keep it in the mix. And then event-driven architecture, an event-driven model. Really critically with serverless-based solutions, but across all the solutions you have. In serverless-based solutions, if you're using events, then you're only doing things when you have to do them, which means you're saving money. But regardless of that, if you do that model, or even if you went to dedicated, an event-driven model allows you to program in a way that's very reliable and predictable. If you imagine drawing the diagram of how those systems interact with each other, it's much easier if you draw one line that says this happens and I do this, than saying, oh, I'm checking here and then I'm checking here and then, if you logically think about it, it makes building and understanding those complicated cross-role, cross-API, cross-organization applications easier to understand. How are we doing? So we have a number of reference architectures. Hopefully the link there isn't too low on the screen so you can't see it. If you've not gone and had a look at them, this is an example of how they fit together. And the kind of very simple demo I just showed you fits within this reference architecture. And there's a bunch more guidance there on how we set these systems up, how they interact together. So I would absolutely recommend you go and have a look. Contribute your feedback. Like all the Microsoft docs, you can submit PR comments to us. But to help understand how you can build this iPaaS solution with Azure Integration. The other thing you can do is just to mention that we do have a white paper that covers a lot of this at the address you see there. So I'll let you take a photo of it if you want to. This is targeted much more at the kind of a high-level business decision maker. But it will allow you to help show why we think the way we do about our iPaaS within Microsoft and how it can solve a lot of your problems. Okay. Let's look at recommendation number 2. Quite often get a call from a customer team, and the discussion is customer X is looking at adopting Azure integration, and they're doing it because they want to save blah. And, my heart sinks because customers purely looking to make cost savings, purely looking to take the technology and the benefits of the cloud and just then using it to save a bit of cash, are thinking about it completely wrong. There may be an opinionated opinion of Matt's. If you think about the customers we had yesterday in the keynote, so H&M, Shell, and Anglo Gulf Trade Bank, not a single one of them is doing what they are doing to save money. That is not the primary goal at all. They are doing it because, go back to what I was talking about with digital transformation. They see the benefits of the cloud as a way for them to be more agile and effective as a business and deliver new things to their customers and compete with their competitors. If your customer is coming to you talking about this, or within your organization, what you're doing is purely being driven from a cost-saving point of view, I think that's a much, much more difficult conversation to have. Think about the buckets that John provided, where our customers are really making a difference. It's about transforming what they do. It's about democratizing technology so that technology can benefit a much wider group of people. It's about innovation, about being able to do stuff you've never done before, and also as a way in which you can quickly try things out and fail fast. So if your customer is talking to you that way, I think hopefully the stories we've told you the last couple of days will help you to change that conversation to one that is more about a positive, value-based experience. Building a migration plan. So the next things customers tend not to have is, and it also tends to be similar to those customers who are just thinking about cost saving, is really thought about the steps to actually go on this journey. Because, it doesn't happen in 3 months. It's something that is an evolution over time, and it's driven by your goals, and that's why having value-based goals is so important. I'm going to dig a bit deeper now into one particular one that I see come up quite often, and it's more specific than that because it's about customers who are existing BizTalk customers, or they may be other middleware that you're doing integration with, but I'm going to talk about BizTalk right now. And this question comes up: Hey, Microsoft, have you got a nice silver bullet for me that I can use to solve all my problems just, click, then run the XE, and then it'll migrate me to the cloud? And then the answer, positively, is no, we haven't got one of those. We're not planning on doing one of those. But let's be positive, there are a load of things we can do. And there are some very good reasons why we don't have a one-click run the XE and then I'm in the cloud solution. There isn't a one-to-one mapping. This is a different paradigm. A lot of the middleware technology that was out there and developed over the kind of 90s and 2000s is based on different paradigms. They didn't have, we didn't have SaaS really in 2002. So there's a number of different concepts that you need to take on board and bake into your design of what you want to do with your business when you're building this integration technology for the future. Things like connectors, so you don't have to write the code to connect to all these different SaaS services. Like the API economy, so you can have the same interface for your internal applications as the one you present out to external partners and vendors. Like serverless, like reactive scale. It's a different paradigm, and there's no point in just taking everything we had and shifting it. So it needs to be a gradual process with a plan. So with BizTalk, there are a number of things we can do. I'm painting quite a negative picture, but there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do. What I think makes sense is that you've got to think about these things together. So we can take schemas and maps and EDI assets, and we can run them in an integration account. And we can remodel things from BizTalk, like orchestrations and pipelines and logic apps, pretty well. There's a few specifics in this case that are much more tricky. So things like, I did work at one point, and I think with a couple of people in the audience, on a BizTalk project that had many more than 1 million lines of code. And the question from customers in similar spaces, can we run that just in the cloud? And no, you cannot run 1 million lines of code. We cannot just lift and shift that. If you've got a huge code base outside BizTalk, we need to have a think about how we're going to approach this project. The other one is business rules. And this one comes up quite a lot with customers and said, do you have a business rules solution? And we say, well, what are you using business rules for? And the response is, oh, business rules, which is not all that helpful. Because there's a huge variety in what people do with business rules, and there's some things we can do very well and remodel, and some things we need to really understand in more detail on what exactly you're doing so we can give you the right solution. So what I suggest people do, and this is what I do when I have this conversation with customers, is really trying to buy into the things I've talked about. Digital transformation as a whole and what the benefits and iPaaS are, but thinking about even those lower level things, and this is how you really get the kind of developer teams and solution architect teams to think about it, thinking about API economy and what the benefits are, thinking about being able to build that application glue without having to write lots of code unless you want to. Thinking about serverless or dedicated, we can do both, and the benefits of being able to have both. And then pay as you use it. So you don't have to sign a massive contract. You don't have to install all the software. You don't have to do all this before you can get your hands on the technology and see if it works for you. So what, again, just going back over this, if that migration plan, identify use cases. You've got to work out what you want to do. What's the end goal that we're trying to achieve? Design a target architecture, look at the reference architectures we've given you, and then bake that into a migration plan. I have to hurry up. Don't undergovern. Classic one. You get a call from the account team, and they introduce you to a developer team within the customer. And that customer has not used a cloud very much before. And this developer team has been let loose on that Azure account. And it's really exciting of all the things we can possibly do. Wow. Somebody's going to take a photo of me with that face just then, and that will be on my picture next year. We love that customers love access to all the tools. We love that they can take serverless and they can do amazing things with it and they can play with it and they can do all sorts of stuff. But if you have no governance at all, you are going to end up with chaos. And you're going to end up with lots of dev teams with lots of competing ideas on how this all works, and you're all going to end up fighting about it. And you're not going to benefit from a unified architecture that connects those systems together. And this is so much more important with integration and middleware than perhaps some of the other ones, because at least you can separate them out. But if the thing in the middle doesn't work together and everybody thinks it should work differently, how are you going to make this happen for the customer? How are you going to get to that digital transformation goal if everybody's doing everything different? You don't have to be massively controlling, But simple things like, how are we going to do DevOps? How are we going to do reporting? What are our rules about how we put APIs together? You need to think about some of this stuff, and you need to think about it early, because you're going to be so much more successful if you do. Conversely, though, very different customer conversation. Talk to the account team. Hello. Yeah, we've played with your stuff, and we think it's great. And what we're going to do now is we're going to have a 4-month RFI, where we're just going to compare you against competitors. And then if you're successful, then what we're going to do is we're going to go through a 3-month security review. And then, if that, once we finish that, we'll then have a 6-month pilot where we put together a platform. Once we have that, we'll document it, and then we will give it to some other developer teams, and then we will do rapid innovation. Wow. Probably cuts a bit close to home to some of you. And I totally understand, and that's a complete joke about how some organizations have to operate. And you know, if you're in financial services, I get it. The problem is, it completely stifles that innovation process. There's no reason why you can't do some of that governance at the same time as trying the technology and looking for value. And this was the interesting one with H&M yesterday. I hope you remember what they were talking about, is they have an integration competency center. And what they've decided to do is say, look, this stuff is hard, and there are pitfalls, and there are security issues we need to deal with. But we don't want to lock ourselves up in a constant cycle of governance and preventing people from, you know, using the technology and looking for value. So what that team does is kind of marshals the rest of the company and allows them to innovate, try stuff out, feedback to Microsoft and the vendors and suppliers about how they're building things quickly so that they can find a way through that works for them. And I think, again, if either in your organization or within your customers that you're working with, you know, look for these red flags that the customer's going to get completely stalled. And I see this in customers I work with. In ones I've talked to like 18 months ago, they still have not moved anywhere. The problem is your competitors are. Your competitors are looking for value. Your competitors are looking for these new scenarios. And they're going to be able to change things more quickly than you are, because in 3 years you might still not have done anything innovative. You might not be on this digital transformation journey. This is also where things like why the kind of VNet connected solutions that we've provided and we're giving you, like integration service environment, like APIM Premium, are really, really important, because that can change that conversation completely. And what the conversation I have is, look, let's think about a target architecture that we have with ICE, with APIM Premium, with Service Bus and service endpoints. But let's not stop the team that is working on trying to envision how this is going to work for you in the future from working. Let them use serverless for now. Let them innovate. Because I tell you what, if they can produce a POC that they can show to the board of what they can do in the future, those roadblocks to innovation, that security requirements, things like that can be freed up really, really quickly when there's the right impetus. The final one, thinking about cultural change. And again, whether you're talking to customers about this, or whether you are one of those customers, whether it's your job within an IT team or a business team, embarking on this journey, there's a big difference in the way kind of middleware and services within IT were managed. And I see this again and again with customers. It was managed by one team who were super highly skilled and knowledgeable, and they managed the estate of technology that did this integration between systems, because it was highly sensitive and dangerous, and it required a lot of skill to do that. What happens when technology provides a set of tools that means that any dev team can subscribe and integrate with your systems, that any dev team can build workflows that connect one system to the other? You end up with that team in the middle has got to change what they do. They have got to be guiding the rest of the business, accelerating the rest of the business. But that is a very different culture from having a high level of expertise on one particular thing, and much more about enabling others, creating guidelines, creating references. Again, call you back to what H&M are doing with their Integration Competency Center. That's what that team does. It enables others. And if you are working on a team that previously controlled all this stuff, you're going to have to think about where you want to be and how it's going to work for you when you lose a little bit of control, but you massively increase the influence of what you're doing. So, perfectly timed. Those are my 6 things for making Azure integration real. I know this wasn't a deep technical session, but I hope for many of you the things I've talked about have resonated and are things you see happening either within your company or with your the partner companies that you're working with, your customers. And hopefully what I've talked about here gives you some talking points that you can go back and talk to your colleagues about and your customers about to help them be more successful with their iPaaS, with Azure integration, and with Azure all up. And with that, I'm done. It was useful, thank you.
Covey.co